I'm passing over the stage to Melissa Densmore from the University of Cape Town and Susan Wyche from Michigan State University to present the next paper.
So thank you, Matt, and good afternoon. Today, well, first of all, I'm Susan, and I'm at Michigan State University. This is my collaborator, Melissa Densmore from the University of Cape Town, and Brian Geyer is an anthropology student at Michigan State University who is not here today. Today we're going to talk about results from two short-term exploratory studies looking at farmers in rural areas in Zambia and Kenya. So most people in sub-Saharan Africa are farmers with small pieces of land, large families, and poor crop yields. And widespread mobile phone ownership among some parts of sub-Saharan Africa mean that for the first time there's a real opportunity to deliver farmers pertinent information that could help them grow more crops and possibly make more money from selling them. And despite this expanding body of academic and applied research on mobile phones, the ICTD community still knows very little about what is this largest segment of the mobile phone users in the developing world and their evolving attitudes towards these devices. And although we're still learning about farmers and their attitudes towards mobile phones, that hasn't stopped developers from creating what seems like a dozen or more applications that target this social group. I think two notable examples in this area are farmer advisory systems, so typically SMS applications that send farmers weather alerts, notifications about disease outbreaks. And another really notable application in this area is market information systems. Again, SMS applications that typically send rural farmers crop pricing information to address sort of the asymmetries in information between the farmers and the traders. And we had a lively discussion at a wonderful open session on these applications yesterday, and there's a real debate on what impact these applications have, and if any. Kevin Donovan suggests that the consequence of not knowing farmers' existing practices and how they're using phones means that we're continuing to develop mobile interventions that fail to gain traction with smallholder farmers because their existing practices are incompletely understood. So, very similar to the prior study, this study was about beginning to fill that gap in our knowledge. This was, again, studies that took place in rural areas and two rural areas in Kenya and Zambia. These countries, predominantly large numbers of farmers, relatively higher mobile phone ownership compared to other countries in their neighboring countries. Lots of interviews and focus groups with smallholder farmers, talking to roughly 200 in total. All the groups were done in local languages with local research assistants. And there was also a real emphasis in documenting the types of mobile phones people own, the models, the condition. Also really looking inside the phones, getting a sense of the quality of the battery inside of them, how many text messages were in their inboxes. I have come from an HCI and design background, so I tend to use that lens when analyzing the data and thinking about their implications and to generate the findings that are listed here that I will let Melissa discuss.
Great. Thanks, Susan. Susan did most of this field work herself, and then it's just been great to chat with her and think through all the findings she had. So we find that these farmers are faced with a choice, and more this choice is leading to fake phones over originals. And by fake, I mean the phones that are made to look like the basic Nokia phone, maybe some of the feature phones, but they're made by Chinese companies at low cost. They tend to break easily, but they also have more features. So despite an understanding that the China makes cost more for the farmers in the long run, these farmers are still buying them because they're attracted to the features and the prices of these phones. Good speakers, being able to have more style to them, making it look like they have more features than they have. And what's happening now is that the first generation of durable phones is now dying off. For a long time, I felt like the Nokia phones would be there always, like never able to really replace smartphones. But we're seeing more and more adoption of non-basic phones because the prices are coming down. But as the prices are coming down, these more durable phones are also suffering from feature creep, lack of durability, and lowered battery life. And our focus on apps feeds into this. It leads to lowered battery life of the phone, and the design of the hardware is shifting to make phones less and less useful, even as information and communication devices. These farmers are also forced to leave their phones in kiosks for several days a week so they can charge them. And these kiosks are often kilometers away from home. Their primary costs for these phones can be actually keeping them charged rather than keeping airtime on them. Original batteries get swapped for fakes, and so even though they might have started out with a new battery, it's hard to keep that. And that means that they can't receive calls and SMSs because their phones are off. And even aside from these technical difficulties, agricultural information systems will have other challenges. So the farmers that we talked to in Homa Bay in Kenya received info from the Kenya Agricultural Commodity Exchange, but said that the service was only useful intermittently. Now, this could be potentially addressed with better design, improved understanding of users, but the complication entailed in using the available phones and services makes them almost impossible for farmers to use, or they're not able to even remember how to use them when they're only using them once every few months. And all of these mobile applications face another barrier. The farmers we interviewed had very little balance on their phones. They were inundated with confusing messages. They sometimes accidentally subscribed to services that were advertised to them by USSD or whatever. And they saw what little balance they had drained away by these services that they couldn't understand, they couldn't read, they didn't need. And they didn't know how to unsubscribe from these services. Superstition, religious beliefs, and rumors also pose barriers for use for farmers. And this is discussed in more depth in the paper if you want to hear more about it. And we want to make the statement that an appreciation of and a deeper understanding of such matters is crucial for technology developers and researchers from the scientific and technological north who are developing mobile applications and services for rural African farmers. We'll let Susan wrap this up.
So what do these findings mean? Well, I think Durish and Manwaring's recent discussions on post-colonial computing have a lot to say about what we're finding and how to make sense of it. And they write that focusing on what we might build tomorrow obscures technologists' understanding of what is happening today. And I think there's something to this. Instead of these sort of future-oriented visions of how farmers might use mobile phones, I think there's an opportunity to step back and focus on ways to improve the mobile phones themselves, the interfaces, their form factors, their motherboards, every aspect of them. And also to better educate people on how to use these phones. So here I'm going to briefly discuss two potential ways to achieve this goal. Again, handsets need to be better. I mean, they're just not designed for the rural context where they're used, and I'm not quite sure how to remedy that problem, but the handsets themselves are terribly flawed. One thing that we may be able to have an impact on and that we're continuing to move forward with are these educational interventions. We're collaborating with a reality television show in Kenya called Shamba Shape Up. Is anybody here familiar with that show? Angela? So they adopt sort of a digital green approach. It's a reality makeover show where they go to farmers, teach them best practices, and they've demonstrated a great deal of success and impact in helping farmers do things better. So we're partnering with them to develop video clips to teach rural farmers about how to unsubscribe from these message services that deduct their airtime, how to delete messages off their mobile phone, how to create a blank space when entering a text message, how to change from the predictive text entry mode to the traditional text entry mode. But again, it's really about rather than thinking about how farmers might use phones, taking a step back and focusing on how to help them better use what they already have and improve on what already exists. One of the limitations of working with Shamba Shape Up is that it is a television broadcast, and of course we're working with most rural farmers that don't have access to television, so we'll be taking these video clips, going into rural villages, and showing them. We're mostly focusing on women farmers and seeing what sort of impact we can possibly have by teaching farmers how to better use their mobile phones. So just a summary, things to take away from this talk. While many popular and academic narratives depict a really positive outlook in the way technology will bring sustained benefits to farmers, we see these parallel developments that really complicate these storylines, what Melissa talked about, the counterfeit phones, the SMS scams, and the broader misconceptions about phones and how to use them. And I think that means to take a step back and, again, rather than thinking about how phones could be used, really re-examine the mobile phone and figure out how it can be better suited for the context where farmers are using it. So again, the work was affiliated with our HESN USAID project at Michigan State University. And I want to thank all of our participants and local research assistants and Melissa. So that concludes our talk. I guess we had a lot we put down.
Okay, great. We have lots of time for questions.
This is really fascinating, and you paint an interesting picture of of the people who experience a whole set of issues in using mobile telephony. I'm wondering though, in your work, are you able to distinguish between those who sort of get it and sort of use the mobile phone and sort of increase their reach or increase their situation or use it to do a better job of being a farmer, as opposed to those who kind of somehow get beat up by the technology?
So that's a good question, and I can have some evidence that can speak to that. So even among the farmers who sort of get it, who are using the systems, there are new barriers that exist. So we talked to sweet potato farmers in Migori County in southwestern Kenya, and they had used a market information service at one point in time, and then a couple seasons later, they didn't have enough sweet potatoes to sell, they forgot the short code. So there are new challenges that you have to encounter once the farmers do sort of get it. That's one thing I'm thinking of. So my answer to that is that there are some that get it, but then there are these other challenges that come. Remembering the short codes, being able to benefit from the information once you receive it.